Today we are going to prep sand a face frame for a barnwood 3-drawer chest. And the first thing I want to do is identify my parts. So if I need help doing that, I can always refer to my work order. These 4 right here are my rails, my horizontal rails that are going to butt into the stiles that run vertically. So with the rails, the reason why we need to know what we're working with is because we do sand the parts a little differently. These rails, what we're going to do is we're going to turn on the flap sander. We're going to sand with the 100 grit. I'm going to flap the good face, and then I'm going to come over to the other flap sander where we've got the drum sander, and I'm going to bevel with the grain, flip it over, and bevel the other side with the grain, and then I'm going to bevel the ends also. I'm just going to come across here like so, flip it around, and do like so. So that's how I'm going to treat these 4 rails. These 2 pieces that are 1.5 inches thick, these are my stiles. Stiles always run vertical, rails always run horizontal. So for the stiles, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flap sand with 100 grit, the good face, and then I'm also going to flap sand an edge. Well, in actuality, we're going to flap sand 3 sides, 2 faces and 1 edge, because some of the back of the stile will show, so we need to sand that as well. So I'm going to flap sand here, flap sand an edge, flap sand the other face, and then come over to the drum sander. We're going to bevel 3 edges. The good face, we're going to bevel 2 edges here and here, and then 1 more edge along the back. We don't need to bevel the top and the bottom. So now our parts are sanded. We're going to go over to the assembly bench and we're going to start pocket cutting our rails. So I'm going to put 2 pocket cuts in each end of my rails. And I've identified my rails and I have them all here in a pile ready to go. I need to adjust my pocket machine to the thickness that I need, that we're working with. The clamp needs to all but touch the stock that you're working on, so it clamps down when you make the pocket. Okay. We've pocket screwed our rails, and now we are ready to lay out our face frame. We're going to lay it out upside down so we can screw it together. So I need to identify what's the front and the back of the stile. I'm going to start on one end and I'm going to flush up the top rail with the top of the stile. Depending on the setting of the pocket machine, the distance from the end of the rail to where the pocket machine stops really dictates at what length screw we want to use. It's safer to use a 1 1/4. We don't want to risk popping through the front, so I'm going to use a 1 1/4. These screws are a square drive with a flat head. They're a special head for this application. So I'm flushing up with the top of the stile and the top of the rail. I'm gonna flip it over and make sure we're okay, and it looks like we are. Now I'm gonna work my way down. So I need to refer to the work order so I know what the layout is, and I already did that, and I happen to know that this is a standard barnwood face frame, which is a 7-inch height opening. So here's my 7-inch spacer. I'm going to set it in here and then just push the next rail up to the spacer. Make sure everything's sitting down flat. Now it looks like we've been adjusting our pocket machine, and we made an adjustment to it. So this particular setting, we're going to need a longer screw, I believe. So I'm going to go with a 1 5/8 screw. So ideally we want to be flush, or really close to flush with the front. And that's why I put a hard backing down, because we've got carpet underneath and it's a little soft. So it's better to have a hard surface when you're building your face frame. So I put my spacer down again, put my rail up against the spacer, and continue to follow the same procedure as I work my way down the stile. So for this particular face frame, we are going to have a 2-inch, the stile is going to be 2 inches longer than the bottom of the face rail. So I'm just checking it to make sure everything still looks good. So I'm going to spin it around. Now we're going to go ahead and make sure we start from the top again, so we're flush at the top. And I'm applying pressure down on the stile and the rail kind of together, so I know that I'm really close to flush on the outside. And then I'll put my spacer in again, and I'll push my rail up against my spacer, make sure it's down. This is a pretty simple face frame. The 6-drawer or the 7-drawer or the 9-drawer have more parts to it, and there's a little more to the assembly of that one. So my rail was sitting too low. I didn't have my rail sitting flat on my table. There we go. I knew something was wrong. Now I'm going to flip my face frame around and take a look at it. See if everything looks good. We're not absolutely 100% perfect, but we're within acceptable range. Okay, so the next step is I'm going to take the orbital sander and go over everything with the 150 grit. So I'm going to sand the back of the stile first, because some of this stile is actually going to show when we assemble the piece of furniture. I'm also going to sand the sides of the stile, because that is going to show. I'm also going to bevel the bottoms of the legs with the orbital sander. And then I'll flip it over and then sand the face of the face frame as well. Okay, so we want to sand this to a pretty smooth finish. Sometimes the planer will leave marks, and I was trying to sand enough to get rid of those planer marks. And the other thing you want to do is just take a look at your face frame at different angles, because the light shows differently. when you look at it from different angles, and you might see different things, but from what I'm seeing, my face frame looks pretty good. The last thing I'm going to do is just by hand take 150 grit sandpaper and just make sure my edges are broken. Okay, so our face frame is sanded up. Last thing to do is to stain it, and then it's ready for assembly. I'm going to stir up my stain first. And then there should be a sponge in here, and I can feel it. I'm going to fish it out. I'm going to squeeze out about, I don't know, 75% of what was on there, because I want to be real careful the way I apply it. I personally like to apply with the grain. This water-based stain seems to be a little less forgiving than the oil is. And I'm going to go ahead and stain the entire thing and then go back with a dry rag afterwards. For these face frames, I think it's just easiest just to get the entire thing, even though, you know, most of the backside won't be seen. But when the drawers are open, sometimes you will be able to see into the edges of the face frame. Okay, I believe I got 100% coverage. Now I'm going to go ahead and take a dry rag and just wipe it down. And I think you want to apply a little bit of pressure on this because of that water-based stain. It sets up pretty quick. Make sure you're spreading out the stain and make sure there's no buildup or pools anywhere. Okay, here we go. There's our face frame. It's ready for assembly.